Hey, Links Outdoors here, and this is going to be a post-Pacific Crest Trail gear review talking about the equipment that I brought, how it worked for me, would I recommend it for you. So please stay tuned. We're going to go through this. It's going to be a long video, but I'm going to go over kind of each piece of equipment and let you know my thoughts. So with any backpacking trip, the backpack is probably a good place to start. So I started this thru hike with this pack. So this is the Nashville Packs Cutaway, the 40-liter version. If you're not familiar with the pack, it's frameless, waterproof, taped seams. It's famous for its running vest style shoulder straps and also its accessibility. You can get to every single pocket from either side. There's a pocket underneath in the bottom that you can get to from either hand, left to right, instead of a lot of the packs that have the bottom packet. Usually you have to go in from the right side. And it's extremely light. Basically how you see it right now, it's about a pound exactly. So I started off with this pack. My goal for the PCT was to go as light as reasonably possible. And it made sense from switching from something like this, which is a Superior Wilderness Designs Ultra Long Haul 50, which I used on the Continental Divide Trail in 2023, to go to something lighter, because this is about a pound, and then this, with a way that I like to configure it, is closer to like 2 3/4 pounds. So it seemed like a great way to save a lot of weight. And without spending too much time on the pack, it worked well. I used this pack from the beginning, so the Mexico border by Campo, until I got to Kennedy Meadows South, which is the sort of unofficial place that the Sierra section starts, because you go up into the big snowy mountains. And that's also an area that requires a bear canister. So I knew I wasn't going to comfortably be able to carry this plus a 2-pound can and everything else. So I planned on switching to this pack for the Sierra, and then I thought I would want to switch back to this pack afterwards once I got to ditch the can. Well, long story short, this pack did really well in the desert section. However, whenever I had a longer food carry, meaning like a full resupply, and I had to carry 4 or more days of food on me leaving town, or if I was in a deserty section that actually had a long water carry, trying to carry more than 2 liters of water plus that amount of food was just not comfortable for me. I don't pack quite light enough that I can get away with that level of load in a pack this light. I have too many sort of like glampy, I like to call them luxury light items that I just am not willing to sacrifice because I find it worthwhile to carry the tiny bit of extra weight. And I'll go through that stuff, of course. But anyway, I did end up mailing myself this pack. I switched to this pack, and then I just didn't go back to this pack. I thought there was going to be a lot more people with frameless packs on the PCT than there actually was. If you watch videos like this, like me, you probably assume that most people out there are going to these ultralight setups with frameless packs and all that other kind of stuff. And I can tell you from my experience, like, yes, they are out there, but they're definitely a minority. I would say less than 1% of all the people that I met on the CDT or the PCT actually use a frameless pack. So anyway, I'll do a gear review video on this pack because it is a good pack and it definitely has its place, but for the Pacific Crest Trail, it wasn't right for me. So let's talk about the pack that I did switch to. So I love this pack. I have an entire 5,000 mile review on this pack and how it did. I'll put the card up here so you can check that out. So I don't want to go into too much detail because you can check out that video if you're curious. But anyway, this is Superior Wilderness Designs Ultra Long Haul 50. So what all that kind of means is that it's made out of ultra fabric, which in my opinion is the best fabric on the market right now for its weight, its durability, and its waterproofness. It just can't be beat. This particular pack is 50 liters, so it is pretty big, but at the same time, it has a roll top, and you can actually get it down to about 35 liters if you really pack everything compact and tight and put stuff on the outside of the pack. This is a framed pack. There's 2 aluminum stays on the back panel here, very similar to something like a Hyperlight mountain gear pack if you're more familiar with those. The way that I have it configured are these 2 huge hip belt pockets. This I would keep my phone in. The mesh was my trash pocket. This over here was an organizer for like my sunglasses as well as lip balm and sometimes bug spray. And then another thing about the pack that I really like is this stretchy sleeve here is able to hold a piece of thin light pad. And so this made it so, because it was on the outside of the pack, anytime I stopped to take a break or something and I wanted to have a nice seat, I could pop this out. So that made it much more accessible to take this in and out and use it as a comfortable everyday item. So this pack worked really well for me. If I was going to recommend any single pack to the masses, I would recommend this pack, or at least one of the Superior Wilderness Designs packs. They have a bunch of different models. I would recommend going with a lightweight framed pack. There is definitely a place for frameless packs, but I think it's a little bit of a specialty kind of thing. And if you're just sort of getting into this and you haven't tried out a frameless pack with 4 days of food and 3+ liters of water plus all of your gear, you might find that it's not for you, and it's a lot of money to buy a frameless pack. These actually don't cost that much more. So I would recommend something like this. If I was going to leave again tomorrow for any of the big three, I would probably take this pack with me. So I want to touch upon the accessories that I use that I kind of consider part of the pack. So when I started off with the Nashville pack, I had this as the back foam panel that I would have on the part of the backpack that goes against my back, right? So you know what I mean, like that. There was shock cord on the pack that would hold it in place. And it added a lot to the comfort. And just like I was talking about with the Thin Light pad on the Superior Wilderness Gear pack, this made it so I could pop it off really easy and use this to sit down on the ground. And this piece is actually even a little bit bigger than the other one. So it made it really convenient to take it off for breaks and stuff, which is a really nice thing. If you were to put this inside your pack all the time, you're probably never going to take it out except when you get to camp. So having it on the outside of the pack was nice. One drawback to that I didn't consider beforehand is that you're working hard, you're in the desert section, you're going to sweat a lot. So your body sweats, your shirt absorbs it, and then it tries to wick out. But this doesn't absorb any moisture at all, so the sweat would kind of get outside the shirt and it would drip down. And essentially this bottom part of the pad was touching sort of the small of my back, kind of right where my waistline is. And what would actually happen is the sweat would get my shorts and my underwear wet. And it was extremely uncomfortable because it felt like I sat down in a puddle, but I was in a desert, the opposite of a wet place. So that was actually really unpleasant, and I never would have imagined that being an issue. So I'm currently playing around with ideas of having a smaller piece of foam that's only up on kind of up on the center of the torso up. So I'm playing around with that. But anyway, that was part of my setup. The other thing that I did on that Nashville packs is I did have this removable hip belt. And you might be saying like, well, a frameless pack isn't meant to have a hip belt. And normally I would agree with you. You're not going to transfer the weight to your hips like you would with a framed pack. However, when you do use a removable lightweight hip belt like this, what you can do is you can bring the load in and like kind of rest it on the small of your back, so your curve here actually does a pretty good job of not letting the pack continue to pull down. So you're not transferring the weight to your hips, but it is taking some of the pressure off your shoulder for sure. And I actually used these every single day when I carried that pack because it helped so much, especially when it was heavy. So even with a frameless pack, there can be benefits for using a hip belt like this, and I was glad that I brought it. Another thing that I consider part of my pack setup is this fanny pack here. So this is a Through Packs Summit Bun. My original plan with the cutaway was to use this hip belt, and then there's sort of like a sleeve here, and was to pass both buckles into here and then have the fanny pack be part of the waist belt. And what I found out was I really just didn't need that much quick access to things. This particular pouch here is a great little fanny pack. It has dividers inside for organization. It's got a spot back here for your phone. It's really padded. But I found that with the Nashville packs, I had so many pockets on my shoulder straps, I just didn't need more stuff here. So I ended up never using this as I walked for a fanny pack. And then I thought, okay, well, I'll use it in town. It'll be a really convenient way to keep my motel key and wallet and phone and stuff on me because a lot of the ultralight gear doesn't have pockets. And so my theory was I could take the hip belt off and I could connect these clips to this, and then I could have just a standalone fanny pack for town, which on paper I still think it sounds like a really good idea. I just didn't use it for that. I never found myself using it for that. So I would recommend you consider a fanny pack if you like these. However, I personally found I didn't have a need for it. I carried this the whole rest of the time, but I really just used it as like a ditty bag organizer. And in hindsight, if I was to do it all over again, I would just bring an ultralight DCF zipper pouch and save myself about like, not that this is extremely heavy, but it's a couple ounces, and you can get a DCF zipper bag for less than an ounce. So that would have been a way to save a little bit of weight and money. And then this is going to be really crinkly, but this is my pack liner. So this is a standard Nylafume pack liner, or trash bag that most people use as pack liners, but I've modified it And so I have a video on how to make this yourself, both if you use the newer Thermarest Neoairs as well as the classic valves. I've got instructions on how you can make one of these yourself, which I'll put a link in the description for that video if you're interested. But essentially this is a pack liner in case it's raining crazy or your pack gets wet in a stream crossing or something. But I've also made it so it can inflate my pad by making kind of a valve here, that, or a plug that can go into the valve. And it works really well. I'll demo it when I'm showing you my sleeping pad. But this lasted the entire time. I didn't have to change out the trash bag at all. I would highly recommend some kind of liner for your gear, just to make it so if things do get wet, it's an extra layer of protection. Moving on to shelters. So I used two different shelters for this trip. The first is, this is a Z-Packs Hexamid pocket tarp with doors, as well as their plus size bathtub floor and attachment kit. So really what it is it's kind of like a very, very lightweight tarp that has a floor attachment to it that you can leave attached. And it's kind of like a tent that just doesn't have bug netting. And in the beginning in the desert where there aren't a lot of bugs and it's not raining very often at all, this worked perfect because I could use just the ground sheet to sleep under the stars, or cowboy camp as they call it. And then if I needed wind protection, I could use the tarp. And sort of the versatility of using one or both or something like that just made it really versatile and light. And it's tough to get much lighter than this without going extremely, extremely light by using like a really thin plasticky ground sheet or something. This is all DCF fabric on both the ground sheet and also the tarp itself. So that worked really well. I started kind of late in the season. I started in a little after the middle of May, which is on the later side. If I started earlier, this would have worked out even better because the bugs started eventually coming out sooner just because I started on the later end of things. So I ended up switching to my other shelter, which was always the plan. So this is my Durston X-Mid Pro. If you follow the channel, you know I've got a lot of content about this tent and I'm a really big fan. I'll put the description link for that and my 5,000 mile review in there too. You can check that out if you're interested. Anyway, without spending too much time on this particular tent, I think it's amazing. I think it's a really good choice for a one-person ultralight trekking pole tent that has lots of room and lots of features. We'll just leave it at that. There's lighter, there's smaller, there's all sorts of other things, but I think that this just does the best job of all those things combined, at least for the things that I want in a shelter. For my stake kit, I carried 8 stakes, and I have this fun little Hilltop Pack Designs stake bag here that I like a lot. So the way that I did this is I had 4 MSR groundhog stakes. So these exact 4, have done the entire Continental Divide and the entire Pacific Crest Trail. I haven't lost a single one, maybe thanks to the reminder on the bag here, and they're still in perfectly good condition. It's incredible how durable they are and how well they hold. And then I also used 4 of the mini groundhogs. So these are all made by MSR. You can tell the difference in size. I used these ones for the important things, like the corners, or when I was using the tarp, the front and the back as well. And then I would use these little guys as needed for guy outs, or also for little things like holding the vestibule doors open. So a tip for you is I store all of my smaller stakes tip up, so all of the pull cords are in the bottom, and then I stored all these big ones because I'd always want these first with the tip down, so the cord is at the top, so it made it really easy just to pull out the ones that I was going for. I would highly recommend a stake setup like this. These worked amazing. You can definitely get lighter out there, but you're not going to find more durable with better holding power than the groundhogs. Next up, let's talk sleeping mat. So this is one of the areas that I justify bringing extra weight. And if I really wanted to become one of the hyperlighters, this would be one of the first places that I would likely have to change. So this is a new Thermarest Neoair X Lite wide width NXT, which is the latest version of it, which is a 1/2 inch thicker, making it 3 inches thick when it's inflated. The wide version means that it's 25 inches wide. I'm not a super wide person, but what I do find is that I like to be able to get my elbows on my sides when I'm trying to sleep because it helps a lot with comfort. And I turn over a lot while I sleep. So when I turn over onto my side, it still gives me enough of a width for my knees to be bent and for my arms and things to always stay on the pad, which is more comfortable and warmer. So I've used this exact pad for both through hikes and it did amazing. I would probably award the best piece of single gear of the entire trip to this air mat. And the reason that I say that is that I didn't have to repair a single tear or puncture the entire CDT. And then I brought the exact same mat with me for the entire PCT. And I had to do one minor repair, but it wasn't a puncture. It was actually up here by the valve. And so if you can kind of see, there's a hard plastic part of the valve that goes into the pad. Well, over the thousands of miles of use that I used it for, eventually a micro little pinhole got worn through where the valve is here. And it just took one little drop of finding, well, first you had to find it, of course, but it took one drop of seam grip, boop, and it was permanently fixed. So it didn't have any real punctures to any cactus or broken glass or thorns or any of that stuff the entire time, both trails combined. And that's just incredible to me. A lot of people think like, oh, you can't bring an inflatable, you're gonna get holes in it and spend more time patching it than anything else. And in my experience, that's just wasn't the case. This is extremely comfortable, very warm. I love this pad, and you might be able to see I've done some modifications to it, and I'll show you now how I incorporated this to make it the most comfortable sleep system that I've ever used. So now's a good time to demo how I use this thing. I'll fast forward it because it's gonna be loud and crinkly and not super exciting, but this is how it actually works. There you go. Obviously in the backcountry, you don't get a table to press it down into, but about 3 big poofs of that bag, or 4 less large ones, is enough to infill this entire thing, which is the wide width and the 3-inch thick one. I usually give it one top off with my mouth and close the valve. And there you go. So this is the shape of it. It's not rectangular. The tapered ends usually fit in most shelters a little bit better than the full rectangular width ones. But anyway, I want to show you how I modified this to make it even more comfortable. So this is a homemade pillowcase that I've made. This is my inflatable pillow part. This is a Nemo Philo Elite Luxury, which is just the core. It comes with its own pillowcase, but I don't use that one. I use this to save weight. And then I made this one out of an Argon 47 nylon-like fabric. And I made a few of these versions until I found the exact size that I wanted to fit this, and to also accommodate my puffy, which we'll get to in the clothing section, as well as my hood for both the sleep system that I used and the clothing section. We'll talk about that later. But anyway, how this works is I would start off by taking my puffy layers, next I would take my pillow, and I made a little window here for the valve. Usually 2 big puffs of air is enough to fill it. And that's about one of the most comfortable backcountry pillows you're ever going to find. So it's nice and thick. It's soft on the skin because of the fabric. It's got down in there for comfort and warmth. And then also I put these mitten clips on here. So what I would do is I would take this mitten clip with the shock cord here, put the valve on the same side of the valve as the sleeping mat here. These simply go through and click into place. And now it's attached. So one of the things that happens all the time to me before this system is my pillow would fall off in the middle of the night and I'd have to wake up enough to reach around and find it. And this just gets rid of that. So this makes it so the pillow is sort of always in place where I want. It's always sort of at the top of the pad. And this just really helped me get the best sleep that I could on this trip, where the sleep's critical because that's how well you're recovering every night to be ready for another exhausting day the next day. So this worked amazing. I wouldn't change a thing. I'm super proud of this thing, and basically it does stay in place really well. So this is my sleep setup, and now let's move on and talk about what I used for a sleeping bag. This is a Timmermade Wren 20 degree false bottom sleeping bag. And so what that is basically is it's a hoodless bag. And this black panel here is not insulated, so it's just a thin nylon sheet. So this is kind of like a hybrid between a quilt and a sleeping bag. with benefits of both, but not necessarily better than either. It's of course a trade-off. So the reason that I use false bottom sleeping bags, and I have for a couple years now, is because I toss and turn a lot, and I have had backpacking quilts, but I have found for me personally that I move around enough that I get cold spots. I let drafts come in from the side of the quilt. So what I found is with this, because my body is lying onto that thin fabric, it does a better job. So when I roll over, I don't get those cold spots as much. So this system works really well for me. You don't have the versatility of the quilt and being able to unzip. You don't have the full hood warmth of the sleeping bag, but it's a great blend of lightweight and still being pretty versatile. So this bag is the one that I started with. Everything I had researched talked about a 20-degree bag being kind of the sweet spot. And actually I said this is a 20, this is a 10. I had this one made as a 10-degree winter Ren, so sorry about that. This is a Ren 10-degree bag. So I sleep on the kind of the cold side, and I don't like to wear all my clothes when I'm sleeping, so I wanted a slightly warmer bag. And this worked pretty well, but like I said before, I started later in the season, and so it just wasn't as cold. If you were starting in March or April, the desert can be much colder at night, and you're looking at temperatures below freezing. I didn't have a single night below freezing in the desert section, or until I got all the way up into the Sierras up very high. So I ended up sending this home earlier than I thought that I would. I ended up sending this home probably around Big Bear City, which is about 400 miles into the trip. And that's where I swapped to my other sleeping bag. And I'll show you that one now. So it probably looks really similar, but this is a different model. So this is a Timmermade Serpentis 20-degree. And the difference between these is the Serpentis is the model that they make to try to get as light as possible. So they do that in a couple ways. So this has 1,000 fill power down, where the Ren normally has 900. It also is a false bottom sleeping bag, but unlike the Ren, the top of it here isn't connected. There's not a full neck baffle of down. There are snaps, so you can kind of close this up. The other thing that's different about these two models that I own specifically is this is what's called the bent knee style that they make, and that allows you to sleep in the fetal position on your side because this box up by your chest is so wide you can fit easily, if you're a side sleeper, just being up in the top if you bring your legs up out of the foot box area. So this is very spacious, and there's good and bad things about that. It's very comfortable to move around in. You can do all sorts of bendy things with your elbows and your arms, or bring your knees up if you like to sleep in the fetal position, or if you're really cold, that's a great efficient way to sleep. So there's the benefits of that. The other thing is I really like this for doing things in the morning because it's so wide that I can sit up in this, and I can sit like cross-legged on my mat here and like eat my breakfast or do whatever I need to do in the morning while still being in the bag, and have this come up and cinch around my shoulders. So this shape I really like, except for when it's really pushing the temperature limits of the bag. If I was going to start again, I would probably bring this same 20-degree one that has the more width up here. It's just, for me, it works really well. I'm personally still playing around with quilts and trying to find a system or straps or something that works for me because I love the versatility of the quilt. I just haven't found a perfect setup yet. So this is the closest to ideal that I have. So I would probably use this for the same thing. I've got two other things that I consider part of my sleep system. So the first is this homemade eye mask, which I made out of scraps of the fabric that I had left over from making the pillow. It's the same material that these false bottom sleeping bags are made out of, and then some very inexpensive curtain light block fabric that I picked up at a fabric store. So this really helps out. The blue material is very soft on the skin, so I would wear it blue side in, so my eyelashes and my eyelids when I blinked and stuff didn't have friction. I knew that in the past I've had issues sleeping at night, either under the stars or with just a DCF tarp, because the moon can be so bright and those fabrics are basically see-through that the moon would shine into my eyes, and sometimes I'd wake up thinking somebody was holding a flashlight over me. So I'm a light sleeper in general, and I found that this really helped with those situations. But what I didn't expect was how handy this would be for other times too. I'm not a big night hiker, but there were 2 different times on the PCT that I did hike at night by getting up either at midnight or at 2 a.m. just to get a really early start for either really big days or days that were really exposed, like the aqueduct section is one of them, and also the sunrise summit that I did of Mount Whitney being the other time. So this was really nice to be able to try to sleep while it was still light out, to get up really early for an alpine start. And then the other time that this really helped out was that when I was either close to the road or in an actual car campground. Those places almost always have lights on all night. There's either cars coming in late or going out early with their headlights that shine onto your tent, or there's like lights on the bathroom houses that are on all night. And again, I'm just really sensitive to that, so I found that this really came in handy for those too. The other part of my sleep system is also part of my clothing system. And you'll notice that both of my false bottom sleeping bags don't have hoods. So what I have is a modular hood. So this particular hood is also made by Timbermade. It's made out of the same fabric. So essentially it's a down hood all by itself. I can use this with my down jacket, which I'll talk about with the clothing, but I also could use it with either of these sleeping bags because there's a draw cord around the shoulders, and both times you can cinch it in, and now you've got a nice warm hood to put on. The major benefits to this, the first is because it's not connected to the sleeping bag, that when you turn onto your side, the hood moves with you, so you're still breathing all that moisture out and not into the down. If you were to do that in a mummy bag and you turned over and the mummy bag opening stayed here, you'd be breathing all of your moisture into the down head area inside that mummy bag. Or if it's not down, still you're breathing it directly into the insulation. So this works really well for preventing that. And then the other thing is that there's this synthetic insulation layer here. And if you're really cold, there are these two draw cords here. And I'll probably get muffled if I keep talking, so I'm just gonna demo it. But if you're really cold, you can give yourself just a tiny little breathing hole. And this makes it so you're trapping all that insulation heat right by your face, and you're still letting all your precipitation come out this small opening. So this did a really good job, and it made it so I could have one hood to use both with my sleep system as well as my jacket for when I really needed to have the warmth there. So now that we've talked about the big four, let's move on to some of the other categories. So now I've got my water system and my kitchen cook system. The water system is a little bit simpler, so let's talk about that first. So I used the Sawyer squeeze for the entire time. It worked great. Most of the water on the PCT is very good quality. There's a lot of snow melt, and in certain areas, the water probably doesn't need to be filtered because it's so cold and clear and moving fast from the snow melt. But that being said, I filter my water all the time and I never got sick. So Sawyer Squeeze is a great choice for its ability to be back flushed. This can last a very, very long time. I didn't have it fail on me. I never have had one of those fail on me. That being said, I personally prefer to have a faster filtering filter because I hate sitting down and waiting for it to filter. So I ended up replacing this 2 times throughout the trip. I would kind of do it like once a month. You don't have to do that, but to me it's worth it to spend an extra $30 to sort of double my filtration rate. So I did replace that pretty often. The blue coupler here I think is absolutely worth it. It doesn't come with it unless you buy it in a kit, so just be careful, but this little $2 thing makes it have a lot of versatility. So first things first, like many other thru hikers, I use smart water bottles. The reason that these are so popular is because they're skinny and tall. They fit into the pockets of the packs really well. This is the first thru hike where I've used an aftermarket cap. And one of the things that I found in the CDT was that it's really easy to lose those caps, or to even just to misplace them. Even if you find it again, like if you put it in a pocket or you put it down and it fell off, it was just a pain. So these I really liked because you can't lose them, they're attached. So as silly as it sounds, these Common Gear caps to me were absolutely worth the surprisingly expensive amount of money I spent on them, because I bought 4 of these caps and they're about $8 each. So that kind of adds up, but to me it was totally worth it. So anyway, one of the benefits of having this blue coupler is that you can screw it onto the water bottle. So this is the clean end. And if you tighten this all the way in, and this is full of clean water, you can actually back flush it by squeezing the water bottle, and it sprays a bunch of the gunk out. So if you do that every time that you filter water, you're not letting any of the stuff that you've removed from the water harden inside the filter. So you're going to get faster flows for longer, or reduce the chance of that actually fully clogging and failing on you. I did carry a 3-liter Canuck bladder the whole time. This is the newer, more durable one. I had my first gear failure on the trip happen in the first week, really, where the older 3-liter one that I had used for the entire CDT and trips before that, this slider broke. So I replaced this on the trail, and this one held up just fine the whole time. But what I really like about these, you're probably familiar with it, you can take the green slider off and then use this to scoop. So it's easy to get a lot of water really quickly if you're by a pond or a lake. You can also open this up and then put it up against a very small trickle, and it's easier to fill this bladder than trying to get it all through this end. And it gives you the ability to carry 3 liters of water around. In addition, you can use it as a gravity filter where you take the dirty end, not the blue cap side, screw it in all the way tight into the bladder, and then you can take one of your bottles. I carried 3 of this exact model bottle. And fun fact, this exact one was the same one that I used on the CDT. So this bottle right here has over 5,000 miles on it. And I did that with another one too. So I started with 2 from the CDT and finished with 2 from the CDT. So just goes to show how durable things that we can consider one-time use disposable really are. So the trick with this is you have to back it off. So you tighten it all the way snug and then back it off just like an 1/8 of a turn. And that way air can escape. But now you can actually hook this up from something and hang it. And this will act as a gravity filter. So the weight of the water will go through the filter because of gravity and fill up these water bottles. And then you can just unscrew this water bottle, screw on an empty one, and do 3 liters like that. So that's my preferred system. I've been using that for a very long time. And I would absolutely recommend you try that if you haven't, because the convenience for carrying a lot of water, as well as having a gravity system, plus the back flushing like I just talked about, I think this is a great system. And I'm surprised I don't see more people doing it. The other thing too is like that's not quite as fast as if you squeeze the water through yourself. There's nothing stopping you from doing that with this exact setup. I could absolutely put some pressure onto this and squeeze it through if I was in a rush, which I certainly did. And then the other thing to note is that this cord here, this is another common gear piece. So the idea is you can take this off, throw it over a branch, and then it's adjustable. So if you put it up here and you wanted to raise this, you can. In theory, I love the idea. I think that personally this doohickey right here, this slider, it's designed to be really ergonomic. Like it's got 2 finger grooves and it is very comfortable there, but there's more times that this little thing acted like a grappling hook. It got stuck when I was trying to take this out of my pack than I would have liked. So I love the idea, but I think I'm going to keep looking for something a little bit smaller, lighter, and low key that can just kind of do the same thing, because I really don't need 2 finger ergos for raising and lowering this thing. Moving on over to the kitchen side of things, this actually kind of qualifies as a water bottle in itself. So this is a Vargo Bot, the 1 liter pot with the handles. You can get it with or without. The silicone heat protector things here are not stock. I got them on Etsy for just a couple dollars, and I think they're worth it, so you're less likely to burn yourself, and it's just a little bit more comfortable to hold. The reason that I say it's kind of like a water bottle is because it has a silicone gasket and threads. So you can fill this up with water, and it's completely watertight. And so if you add the 3 1-liter bottles, the Smart Water bottles, plus the 3-liter Canuck, plus this, I had a carrying capacity of 7 liters, although I only carried that much once, and it was not even part of the PCT. It was to get around a fire closure. So this kind of doubles as both. It's nice for the versatility. The other thing is because this seals, you can use it for leaving town with fresh food. So for example, even though I really don't like McDonald's, I will absolutely eat it when I'm through hiking because it's a lot of calories and something different than noodles. But what I did at the famous Cahoon McDonald's, which is McDonald's that you walk right past on the PCT that everybody and their mother stops at and buys a bunch of junk food, I left with 3 small either chicken sandwich burger things, and they fit in here really, really nicely. So I stacked them right on top of each other, and then I put this lid on, and it kept them from getting crushed. So when I got to camp, even though I had a frameless pack at the time, they were good to go. So kind of a versatile pot here. You can also, if you needed to, you can take these handles off and you could stick this right in a fire if you absolutely had to. You wouldn't want to do that with the silicone on it here. And also this is meant so when you take this off, you can turn it upside down and it acts as a cover because you'd never want to put this on heat tightened. That's how you create an explosive. So don't do that. But I highly recommend that pot. I think it's the most versatile thing that's out there for a lot of reasons. I also like to do mixed drinks. I do instant coffees in the morning. I don't heat them up. I just like to put it in there and mix it and get some caffeine that way. And it's like having a big mug. And for me, that's just a really convenient thing. Especially if you want to do hot coffee too. Having the handles means you're not holding onto the hot metal pot. Anyway, talked a lot about that. The stove that I use, this is a Soto Windmaster. It's pretty much the top stove for an isobutane canister, in my opinion. And the reason that I say that is there's all sorts of tests that you can find on YouTube, and it basically just blows the rest of them out of the water when it comes to fuel efficiency and boil times. So it boils faster than most stoves, and it uses less fuel than most stoves, including all the other popular MSR ones and things that I've used in the past. So it's a top performer. You just can't really argue with it. So it's amazing for that purpose. A couple things about it. The supports here, there's two different models. This is the lighter, it's the 3 support one. It comes off the stove and then it rests flat like that. It's a little bit annoying. You might like misplace it or lose it or something, but I kind of like how small it gets. And then the biggest complaint I have about this stove is the piezo failed really early. And this is the same stove that I used on the CDT in 2023, and the piezo failed early then too, and I replaced it with a brand new one before the PCT, so that's a bummer because I really find this convenient. And so that's my biggest complaint about the stove. It's far from a deal breaker, but what's kind of ironic is 10 years ago on the AT, I used a different Soto stove, and the little piezo thing went strong the entire trip, as well as some shorter through hikes afterwards, so that's a bummer. I stored the pot, not the pot, I stored the stove and the pot support in this little Z-Packs bag. And because the piezo stopped working, I had to keep a small lighter in there too. And so moving on to this sort of stand here. So this was one of those like little fun things that you don't need that I saw, and for the extra weight, I was like, oh, that's great. And so what this is here is it's advertised as a pot protector. So it's a plastic ring that covers the stainless steel ring on the bottom, because the cans themselves are aluminum, but they have a steel ring on the bottom. And that steel ring, when it gets in contact with water, especially if you store it in a pot, will rust, and it gets rust residue on the bottom of your pot, and it gets rust on this. So when you're cooking, you might actually have rust in your food. Nobody wants that. So I was like, oh, well, that's clever. It goes right in like so. And then you can take these little legs, and if you press them in around the can, you can actually really snug it in there, and it makes it so it doesn't rattle. There we go, that's better. So the idea that I had originally was like, wow, that's really pretty quiet. Like, I can't stand it when there's things banging around inside my pot. The reason I ended up not using this setup as it is right now, because I do think it's clever, is that I found that I drink another coffee caffeine break when I stop for my first water filter of the day. I leave camp if I can with water, and then I usually stop sometime around 11 or noon. And I liked to do another instant coffee in this. So I wanted the pot empty on the outside of my pack so I didn't have to dig it out of my pack every time. So ultimately, that's why I sent those little supports in the ring home, because I wasn't storing it in the pot, and then carrying the little can is a lot less efficient for both cost and weight than carrying the next size up for the isobutane canister. So I found that this little thing was not forcing me, but I found that I was buying the smallest size consistently to make that work, and I just didn't use it for that. So I ended up mailing that home. Without spending too much time on the spoon here, this is a Tokes long-handled spoon. Lets you get down far into the bottom corners of the pot without getting your fingers gross. This one has the polished bowl. I really like it. I switched from sporks, and I have not found a single time that I wished that I had little spines as opposed to regular spoon, so I've been converted to that. This is a bear bag hanging kit. I didn't have it the whole time. I started carrying this pretty much after the Sierras, because in the Sierras you're required to carry a hard-sided bear canister, and you don't need to hang the canister. So once I switched back from the can, which I did in Reno, back to this food bag here, I started carrying this because I was still kind of in bear territory, and just figured, why not have it on me? It's not very heavy. This is a little Dutchware, I think it's called their Wasp It's a little titanium carabiner with almost like a boat mooring post on the back. And the cord that I use in here is a brand called Zing It, which is for tree arborists. It's a small braided synthetic cord, very, very strong. It's got like a breaking strength of over 400 pounds, and it doesn't absorb any water because it's not a kern mantle cord. This is basically one piece braided. So this little doohickey is designed to work specifically with that, and it makes it so you can tie off your bearings without any knots. It makes it really nice and convenient. And then this is another Hilltop Pack Designs DCF food bag. I just thought it was hilarious, a pinata for bears. And I've had this for the CDT and the PCT with no holes in it. And a bear has never gotten it. So that's my food system. I think overall, I probably wouldn't change anything. I just wouldn't start with the little pot support thing because I think it's neat, but I didn't use it. And it actually was forcing me to get the small cans instead of the next size up. Once I sent that home, I only carried the middle size. And you just get, those will last you weeks out there, especially if you're only using it to cook your dinner like I typically do. Okay, so this is my packed clothing. Let's just kind of go from one side to another. So my personal style of thru hiking and backpacking in general is I like to just slightly push it to kind of be slightly huffing and puffing most of the time. I'm not a very leisurely walker. For me, a sweatband makes a huge difference. So this is one by a company called Halo that has this silicone band that goes over your eye. And what I found was that this worked really well because the band goes the whole way across your forehead. So as you're sweating into this, it just doesn't get into your eyes. I've used bandanas and things in the past for it, but a dedicated sweatband is something that's worth it to me. I really liked this. I didn't use a mosquito bug net very often. I carried it the whole time because just in case I was in some buggy spot in the desert before I had a full-size tent with bug protection, I knew I might want this. And there were a couple nights that I slept with it. So I was glad to have it. It's kind of a versatile thing. Like you can use it almost as a stuff sack. So I did carry this the whole time. There were a couple times in the Sierras that I did wear that in camp while I cooked and stuff because the mosquitoes were that bad. This is a new piece of gear to me. So this is another Timmer-made item, just like the sleeping bags were. So this is a DCF non-breathable rain jacket. I had this one customized with these very large watertight zippers in the pit zips because this is not breathable. So you've probably heard of waterproof breathable rain jackets. Most of them are. They're meant to allow air to leave, but water not to get in. And so they have their flaws, right? Like they do eventually wet out. So this trip, with it being Southern California at first, I figured why not try something that isn't breathable, because this is as waterproof as your tent. It's made out of the same stuff. The cut and the shape of the jacket I really like. It's pretty long, so it goes down below the waist. It's very light, it's only 4 ounces, but I'll be honest, I didn't find this comfortable. And this is my first time really trying something like this. It's incredible how much you actually do have water vapor coming off your skin when you're sweating and working hard. And once it's not being allowed to leave because it's getting caught in a non-breathable layer, everything inside got damp. And I guess there's an argument like, would you rather be damp with your own sweat, or would you rather the rainwater be getting through? And there's not a right answer to that, but I'll throw it on really quick just so you can see what it looks like. It's kind of crinkly by the microphone. I'm sure it's gonna be annoying, so I'm not gonna talk while I do it so I can fast forward and mute it. So that was a trial piece, and I wasn't sure how I'd feel. And for me, it just didn't work out. The rain jacket I used on the CDT is a Montbell Versalight, which is a Gore-Tex pack light. It's only slightly heavier than that. It's closer to about 6 ounces versus 4, and it has all the same features, plus a pocket, plus it feels like a normal coat. You're not wearing a tent. So overall, I just personally like that better. So that's one thing that didn't work out that I was really hoping would. Moving on, these are some Montbell Tachyon windbreaker pants. They are extremely light. These worked really well. They do have a little stow pocket that they can go into themselves. And one thing I did before the trip, which really was nice, is I added this very small pocket with some more scraps from the pillow. And this allowed me to have my phone and my wallet in my rain pants, or these are not rain pants, these are wind pants, but I would use these for laundry day all the time. And all my other clothes would be in the laundry, and I'd be wearing these, which are a little see-through, but not so much that I couldn't use them while everything else is in the wash. But having my phone and wallet on me while I was doing laundry was very nice. I liked that a lot. So these worked out great. I only wore them while walking 2 or 3 times the entire trip. And it was on really cold, windy days. Mostly, actually all of them were in Washington. And besides a couple times with really early starts in the Sierras, those mostly were just used for laundry. These are a pair of Farpoint Alpha Direct 90 weight bottoms. I wear these a lot to sleep in, and they're extremely warm. So if you wear these underneath these, you have wind protection and warmth. So I would use that on the coldest days, which I only did a couple times. This is essentially 60 weight, or the Ren model. They've kind of changed the way that they advertise them, but this is the lightest hoodie that they make. And they don't typically do a half zip, so this half zip was added. My aunt did it for me. So I like the ability to vent, and I like the lightest weight. I have a 90 weight one as well, the Lark. And I find that I always reach for the lighter one because I don't typically wear this when I'm moving. This is more of an in-camp or first thing in the morning, and I'll take it off pretty early. So this doesn't get a whole lot of use for me, but I really like to have it. And this is my kind of like change into it to be dry in the tent layer along with these. I also have some Farpoint Alpha Direct socks. These were amazing. They're practically weightless. They weigh less than an ounce for the pair, and they're super warm. So sleeping in these helped a lot. And then I actually doubled these up with these rain mitts. So these rain mitts are made by a fellow thru hiker. I don't know the person that makes them, and I don't think they sell them anymore. I purchased these in the High Divide Outfitter on the Continental Divide in Montana. And so I can't really say where you could get these, but there's a lot of things like it. So what I've used for gloves the whole time, even in the Sierras, is I would put my sleep sock on, I'd put the spot that the heel goes on my thumb, and I'd sort of scrunch up the rest and make like a little Alpha Direct mitten. And when you insert that into the rain mitt, it actually does a really good job of having a waterproof, windproof shell, but now you've got a whole bunch of Alpha Direct, which is a very warm insulator, around your hand. So I only used this a few times when it was really cold and raining. I used this for my sunrise morning where I started at midnight to be on the top of Mount Whitney, which is the highest point in the lower 48 of the United States. So that was really cold. So I used this then, and it's already really warming up in here. It's incredible how good this works. Gives you the versatility as well to use just the rain mitts by themselves. I think you should have something for your hands, especially if you start earlier. If I started much earlier, I probably would have brought a more dedicated glove, but with a late season start like I had, this worked really well. Moving on, I had this hat custom made for me. This is a hat that was made by somebody that calls their company Ultralight. And so it is a Alpha Direct earband. There's Primaloft insulation inside with a really thin nylon. The biggest issue with this is it's a little bit too warm to actually hike in. I overheat. And the cut on it is just a little bit too big. It's a little bit sloppy for me. So I typically didn't use this much. I probably should have sent it home and just used the hat that I did use, but I kept it with me the whole time. And there were times that I would sleep in this. That being said, I could have just used my down hood more for sleeping, and that would have probably solved that redundancy there. For the trip, I carried one extra pair of darn tough quarter-length socks, and then I would wear one and I would rotate them through, trying to always wash the dirty one and air dry it on the pack. This isn't really clothing, but it is a multi-purpose item. I really think a towel is worth it. There's a lot of uses for this. Obviously, drying yourself after a shower is one of them. Of course, this one has the ability to help you hitch, which I never needed it for that, but it's kind of just fun. And then there's all sorts of times where you might want that like condensation on the inside of your tent, or if you spill something while you're cooking, you know, it just comes in handy. So I really like having that. This is the hat that I had with me the whole time. This is a brand called Sunday Afternoon. This is the adventure hat model. It's got a chin strap, full brim on the front, covers the neck and the back. There's some reflectors on the back too, which are helpful for being seen. And then my favorite thing about it is that the brim itself folds. So you can make this really small and compact. And I would always keep this one in the morning before the sun was up on me. I usually keep it in my water bottle pocket on the side. And then once the sun was in my eyes, I put on my sunglasses and just grab this and use it for the rest of the day. So this is pretty much the clothing that would live in the pack. Oh, right, the down puffy. So this is the same hood that I used in the sleep system. This is their super ultralight balaclava. They make a more heavy duty one, which I do own, but I didn't bring it on this trip because this is very warm by itself. And then this is the super duper ultralight 0.75 jacket that Timbermade makes. So this is as light as they can make a down garment. And this thing is phenomenally warm for what it is. There's no zippers, it's a pullover, but using this with the neck cinch in conjunction with this hood is extremely warm. It's much warmer than what most people bring for their insulated jackets. So on a dry trip, I would absolutely bring this again. If I was going to do something like the AT with an early start where it gets a lot of rain, I would bring my Enlightened Equipment Torrid synthetic jacket instead. But this was part of my sleep system and my camp clothes, and it was very, very warm. Highly recommend this or something like this. I would definitely bring these again for the same trip. So this is my worn clothing section. So I every day would be wearing the non-packed pair of Darn Tough quarter-length socks. Amazing socks, I love them, been using them for years. Next up, these are some Patagonia 9 Trails trail running shorts. These are my favorite through hiking short, although they don't make them anymore. The reason that I like them so much is that they're very light, fast drying, and I really like how huge the zippered pockets are. It made it so I could wear these and have, when I was like around town, I could fit my entire huge smartphone in there and still zip it up, as well as zip close the wallet. So I just really like that and find them comfortable. They come with a liner inside, and I don't like that personally. A lot of people do. I cut that out. And so I prefer just a pair of boxer shorts. So these are Outdoor Research Echoes, and that's my preferred pairing there. I like those a lot. The same fabric goes into the sun hoodie. This is the exact one that I wore every single day of the trip without fail. It's the only shirt that I brought. It's pretty incredibly clean if you think about what it went through. I'm so impressed with these hoodies. I actually met somebody on the trail that purchased one of these largely because how much I was raving about them before, and a lot of other reviewers talk about how amazing these are too. So pretty incredible. This is very, very lightweight, breathable, it dries incredibly fast. It's comfortable. The hood can be flipped up, of course, to get the sun off of you. I can't say enough good things about it. It's just amazing. Love it. Would absolutely recommend it and bring it again. This is the hat that I would start with most days, and I'd always wear this to sleep. This is just a wool Arc'teryx little beanie. Held up good. It's nice to have something that's light enough that you can move in it. I know a lot of people might want to just bring like a really big warm hat, but that might cause you to overheat really fast. So having something smaller might be better. And then you can use the hood of an insulated jacket for the times that you're really cold. For footwear, these are the Ultra Lone Peak 7s. It's my shoe of choice. I used 6 pairs of these on the CDT, and then they all went on sale the following year because the 8s came out. And I've never used the 8s, so I can't say if they're good or bad or better or worse or what, but I know the 7s work, so I bought a whole bunch of them on sale, and then I went through 5 pairs, finished on my 5th pair on the PCT, and had amazing success with these shoes. This is one of the exact pairs that I sent home. The sole got worn out, but there is no failing of the shoe whatsoever. So I just replaced them as I needed to, as wearing out the cushion in the sole, which is how a shoe should wear. I'm an enormous fan of Superfeet. These are just generic aftermarket inserts that support your foot a lot better than the cheapo squishy stuff that comes in shoes when you buy them. This is an unused pair, but I wear these every day in my life, and I wear them every day on trail. So for me, these are the best $50 you could spend. If there's one piece of gear that I think you should go try out of everything you see in any YouTube video when you're trying to like come up with your gear list, try these. Go to your local REI, they'll have samples of them. It's amazing. I started having my wife use these, and now she wears them every day. She works in the operating room, so she lives in these things too. And now she uses these in her shoes every day. These are a pair of trail runners made by Ultra to work with their shoes, and they do a very good job. There's Velcro on the inside and the outside, which you can stick here and then sandwich. I never had that accidentally come undone. There's also a very easy to use metal hook that goes right into this little lace right there. And I had only used the Dirty Girl gaiters before, and I actually like the Ultra ones a lot better because of that sandwiching Velcro, and these hooks are a lot easier to get on and off and didn't fall off by accident much at all. So these worked really well too, and I'll continue to use the Ultra ones in the future. Let's talk electronics. So love them or hate them, they're a big part of modern day backpacking and through hiking. It used to be the mindset even 10 years ago when I did the AT, it was like electronics can and will fail on you, always have paper Mac backups, and the world has just changed a lot. You absolutely maybe should and still can do that backup system, but most people don't, and on this trip I didn't. Places where it's really important to have them, you should. On the Continental Divide, because it's so remote and out there, I carried a backup phone, a non-activated but always charged backup phone, and I ended up needing to use it because my main phone broke. So have some kind of redundancy, but that being said, on something that's more established like the PCT or the AT, this electronics kit worked really well for me. So I kept it all in a Z-Packs size small dry bag. It's got some Velcro up at the top, and this was a good size. It's big enough to get everything into easily. So for a personal locator beacon, I used the Garmin InReach Mini 2. It's probably not the first time you've ever seen one of these. They do a really good job of tracking you. You can send communication via satellite. You don't need cell service to be able to text. Trying to arrange trail angel rides from places where you don't have service and pick up types of logistics is amazing with this. It really came in handy. For my headlamp, this is a Nightcore NU25. It's very light, very bright, rechargeable, uses a USB-C recharging port, which is what I've standardized my entire system to use, so I don't have to have different cables. Highly recommend this. Moving on, these are the earphones that I used, or headphones. So these are by Shocks with a Z at the end, and then these are the Open Pro Run, or the Run Open Pro something or other. They're the expensive ones, but these were incredible, and I can't recommend these enough for a few different reasons. So one, when you wear them, they don't plug your ears, so you can actually still hear what's going on around you. Whether you're on a road walk, you can hear cars coming, you can hear rattlesnakes, you can hear, hopefully not the big bear that you just accidentally startled that might be charging you, but my point is you can hear. More often than not, you just hear other hikers coming up on you, and you know that somebody else is there, and they don't scare you when they say right behind you like, hey, can I get by? So they're amazing for that purpose. The other thing is they're not plugging your ears constantly, so you don't get the soreness from constant pressure in your ears, which I did have on the Continental Divide Trail. I constantly had a foam earbud in there, and it just started really agitating my ears. They became very sensitive. And it's also bad for bacteria that way. They have microphones in both sides here, and so it allows you to do a hands-free walk and talk kind of thing, which is convenient for making phone calls while I walked. And then also you can pause and play right here with this one-touch button. So if you are walking along and listening to an audio book or music or something and you see somebody, all you have to do is reach up, press this one button, and it pauses it, and you don't have to take anything out of your ears. In addition, there's no cables to get in the way. Other times that I've used cabled headphones instead because I didn't want a battery in them, an extra thing to charge. There were so many times that cable would go down into the pack and I'd have the phone or something in a pocket, and I'd go to take it off and it'd either rip the things out of my ears or pull the cable out of the phone, and so that was just annoying. It's a huge benefit of not having those cables in the way, but highly recommend them. They have a 100 milliamp hour battery in them, and that charges from dead to full in about an hour. In addition to that, if you're listening to audiobooks or podcasts like I do, I don't listen to a lot of music while I'm walking, they go all day long. I've never killed this partway through a day, and they charge back up so fast too that I'd be surprised if they weren't enough battery for you. I had two different USB-C to C cables, nothing fancy. Both of them are rated for more than 40 watts, which is important to know. And so here, this is my wall charger. So this is a Moken, and this is a 45 watt charger. So when you're only charging out of the one USB-C port at a time, it can fast charge up to 45 watts. And the benefit of that is the same max charging speed that my phone, which is recording right now, which is a Samsung Galaxy S22 Ultra. that phone can be charged at 45 watts. And so the benefit of that means that this wall unit here can charge the phone as fast as the phone can handle being charged. So that allows me to top off my phone or charge my phone faster than a smaller, less capable wall charger. In addition, when it has both ports here and I was charging a couple things at a time, it still is able to charge, I think, 15 watts out of both simultaneously. So you're not fast charging anything, but it does still give you the ability to charge 2 different devices at the same time. And this thing is about as small and as light as they come. These things are always heavier than you wish they were because there's a lot of metal and chips and stuff in there. I don't know much about that part, but they're heavier than you'd think, but that's one of the lightest ones you'll find. This is the battery bank that I brought, and it had really good success on this trip. So the brand is Inu. They're one of the less expensive brands that you can get on Amazon. This is the model B63, if I'm not mistaken. I'll put it up on the screen if I find out that's not correct. But it's a 20,000 milliamp hour battery. I'm thinking about doing a whole video reviewing electronics and recommendations for a backpacker or a thru hiker, keeping like a set kit and how they can all work with each other. So if that's something that interests you, let me know in the comments. And if enough people are interested in that, it's something I kind of want to make. The reason being, for one of the reasons, not all 20,000 or 10,000 milliamp hour batteries are the same. The manufacturer actually just gives it its title, and there's no certification that it needs. They could have, so basically you can have better and worse at the same rating, and how much juice they actually can hold, how efficiently they're able to charge. Just because it can hold a certain amount of juice doesn't mean that it's able to have all of that leave the battery. Some are more efficient than others. This one is a good all-arounder for being about $50. It works great the whole time. 2 USB-C ports, 1 USB-A port, and this can fast charge at 40 watts, which means that from dead to full, this can charge from dead to full in about 2.5 to 3 hours, or most of the time if you're just topping it off from like 50% to like 90%, that's about a half an hour. So what that meant is I could stop at a restaurant or just hang out at a post office or something and just top this thing off. And getting an extra 50% of battery in here was easily another 4 days on the trail. So other battery banks that I've used in the past, you would have to basically sleep overnight to charge the battery bank. Like the Nightcore 20,000 milliamp hour batteries, which I've tried in the past and have had awful experiences with. I'll never use those again. They take about 8+ hours to fully charge. So that basically meant I had to sleep in town or sleep somewhere that had an outlet. So there was times that actually meant I was staying in town an extra day or night, buying more restaurant food, and just spending more money. And not that that's all bad, but having the ability to not have to do that is a benefit. So this was amazing. I like to have a thermometer in my kit, just so I know how cold it got down to at night. And this is a Garmin Tempe, or Tempe, however you say it. It connects via Bluetooth with my Garmin Fenix 7 watch. This is the Solar Sapphire. It's what I wear every single day at home. It's huge, but that's part of my backup system because it has a full touchscreen topographical maps profile in it. So in a real pinch, I could still turn it on and see where the trail was, and it would be enough to get me back to something else if I did get lost and my phone was lost or damaged. My watch uses a proprietary charger that Garmin makes, so I needed this little adapter which goes on like so, and then it connects to a USB-C cable. And then you can just charge this via wall or from the battery bank. One other thing is that these headphones here, they do have a proprietary charger. There's another magnetic cable that you need. It's very small and light, and it does use a USB-A. So that's the only thing that I had with me that needed to have the USB-A port, was the ability to charge the headphones. Everything else I've got set up for the C. And then the last little luxury item, which you do not need, but I ended up picking this up in Bend, Oregon, is this tiny little Bluetooth game controller. I play a lot of video games, and I had to start slowing down towards the end of the trip because I had a set finish date that I couldn't get to the end beforehand. So I had some extra little downtime in the tent, and I ended up picking this up, and it was a lot of fun just to mess around on my phone and play some games to kill time when I had not much else to do and I had to go slow anyway. So I wouldn't bring this again, but it was kind of a fun little luxury doodad. Let's finish up by quickly going through the rest, or miscellaneous, if you will. So, talking about consumables really quick, I do have some preferences. It's important for me to have some kind of SPF protection in lip protection. So I don't care what the brand is, and I don't use this stuff at home, but being in the desert and the sun all the time, I want something with SPF protection. This Dermatone stuff was my favorite that I found. It's got 30 SPF, which is actually pretty good. I hate bugs, especially in the Northeast where ticks are so common and they carry Lyme disease. I use really strong 100 DEET. It's controversial. Do whatever you think is best, but this is my solution to those pests, and it works extremely well. You can't argue if it works or not. It definitely does, but the arguments are about the potential health risks. But anyway, it's up to you. And then this is my personal favorite sunscreen. I like it so much that I'd actually have it purchased and then mailed to me in my resupplies whenever I did that. I like the way that it feels. It's not oily, it's reef safe, so it's actually better for the environment when it's getting washed off. You wash this stuff off in the water all the time. Like, you'll see it when you go, like there's a lot of stream crossings, or even just washing your hands, you'll see you're leaving behind basically like oil looking things from your skin and from your sunscreen. So I think it's worth just being a little bit more mindful, if we all are, of not damaging the ecosystems that we like to go recreate in. So that's my non-sponsored plug for that stuff. I think it's amazing. If you haven't tried that exact kind, you should. And the higher the SPF, the better. So this is the 50, and it's not too gunky or zinky. Some of the other stuff that I've used in the past can actually stain your clothes, but that stuff's amazing. For a toiletry kit, I usually used a DCF stuff sack with whatever I could find for toilet paper. Nothing fancy. And I would always keep hand sanitizer in there. Post-COVID, there's still little hand sanitizer dispensers everywhere. You can constantly top off your little bottle. You don't have to replace it very often. This is my trowel of choice. This one has survived both of the long through hikes. It's starting to get a little damaged here in the front, so I might either have to grind that down or maybe it's time just to replace it with another one. But I get the same model. So this is the Bogler Co. trowel, which I like better than the popular Deuce of Spades. The plastic piece here really lets you sort of palm it and stab holes, because you're oftentimes you're actually making a plug that you take away more than you're actually digging like you would in a sandbox or something. The little openings here reduce the weight, and I've always thought it'd be kind of fun, even though I've never needed to use this as a dead man's anchor in the snow or in really loose soil for your tent or something. But anyway, this worked great. For my my toothbrush, I would just use a semi-disposable bamboo toothbrush, and I would like to keep these little silicone covers over it just to kind of keep all the sand and stuff from getting on the bristles. And I let that air dry on the outside of my pack. So these are just little inexpensive things that I got on Amazon. I'm a light sleeper, which I've said multiple times. I always carry a thing of earplugs, and I will replace these as I can. Sometimes I get to a hiker box and there's an entire huge bag of these because somebody wanted to buy one pair in town. You could only buy them in a 50 pack or something. I've definitely left 48 of these things behind in a hiker box, but they help me out a lot, especially in like car camping campgrounds or if I'm by the road. Those things are amazing. This is a small DCF travel wallet that I used as my wallet for both the CDT and the PCT. It's made by Hartford Gear Co., which is kind of cool because Hartford is about 15 minutes that way. So I like supporting somebody local that's making outdoor gear. I don't know them personally. I just know that they are out of Connecticut, so I think that's cool. The sunglasses, I have a raving review for these. So these are the Ombraz sunglasses. This is specifically the Titan model. If you're not familiar with these, they have a built-in cord as opposed to hard arms. And so what that allows you to do is you simply place them on your nose and you pull the two sliders in the back apart, and they just lightly rest on your nose. But you forget that you're even wearing them because there's no pressure on the sides. They work really good with a hat or headband or at home with a bike helmet too. And there's just nothing to break. I did break a pair of regular sunglasses that I had on the CDT, and it wasn't even from crushing them. It was basically just when I was in Idaho, I was taking them off of my eyes and putting them up on my forehead, and just that little bit of extra pressure finally snapped one of the hinges. So that just can't happen because they're not here. They're good quality sunglasses. You can get these like almost like glacier goggle shields for the sides, which I own, but I didn't bring on this trip, and there's no need for them. But this also makes it so it's very easy to store somewhere. Like I'd store this on my shoulder strap that had the pockets, and it would just kind of live right here, and it's very thin, and there's just nothing you're going to crush. So highly, highly recommend these. These are amazing. I was super impressed. It's one of those things you didn't really know how much you could benefit from until you try it. This is my little miscellaneous bag. We're not going to spend much time in here. So in here I have a standard sort of patch kit. It's got some patches for the sleeping mat, even though I didn't really need that at all. Tenacious tape, DCF repair tape for the shelter, stuff of that nature. This is a small thing of Leuco tape, which I didn't really use at all. I carried one flosser, which again, I really didn't use at all, but I kind of knew I might want that, so I brought it. I like these little one-time use super glues for gear repair. This is a spare gasket for the Sawyer squeeze. If you lose this, it's not going to work at all, so I always carry one of these spares. This is a small sewing kit. There's a couple safety pins inside, sewing needles, and some like nylon heavy-duty thread. I've used that a few times on the trip to repair stuff. This is my little first aid kit. It's got real sharp tweezers for digging out anything, ticks, splinters, cacti, thorns, you name it. And a bunch of very, very basic first aid stuff. So some small band-aids, some butterfly strips, stuff of that nature. I used to carry some alcohol pads in here. I stopped doing that because you almost always have hand sanitizer and toilet paper anyway. You can use that stuff to get cleaned up, and then you have a multi-purpose thing. So I actually did stop kind of carrying the alcohol prep pads in here and just using that instead. This is a small tick key. I didn't get a single tick on the CDT or the PCT. I don't even think I saw a single tick on the PCT, and I saw only two on the entire CDT, which is crazy. But living in New England, ticks are everywhere. I constantly have them on me from walking my dog, and I'm constantly pulling them off of her, so this is just sort of like burned in the back of my brain. It's a good way to get the ticks off without squeezing their body and potentially shooting their disgustingness into your body before you get them out, so that works really well. I did have to repair my trekking poles, but these are very, very specific to this pole. But it's a piece of cord here that holds the wrist strap to the pole. And I had to replace them because they broke. So I only used one of the two replacements they sent me, and I carried the other one as a spare. All of that was stored in this really small, I don't know what size it is, probably extra small or maybe XXS sized Z-Packs stuff sack. This is just a bunch of cord. I like the versatility of having a clothesline or guying out my tent more securely, so this has a whole bunch of guy out lines and stuff in it. And then I think it's worth talking about this little guy for a couple moments. So this looks like your standard little SD classic Swiss Army knife, but this is the Messenger model, which I think is the best one to carry. It has magnetized Phillips head screwdriver, which is really good for eyeglasses. It has a bottle opener on it. The blade is the same as the other one, but the big difference is that it has this little slider here, which goes to like a Fisher Space Pen. And that gives you a pen that you always have on you. And it gets even better where you can take the file and you can flip it open and you can actually write with it. It writes pretty well. But the number of times that I needed to write something, especially like at the post office when there's no pens, it's a lot more than you'd think. So having a pen on me all the time really was kind of nice. And then lastly, it comes with the tweezers up here, and I find those tweezers kind of useless. I don't think they work very well at all, especially if you have something that is really hard to get to. So that's why I carry these really heavy-duty sharp ones. These things are much more capable. You can really sort of dig stuff out painfully if you need to, but I think it's worth having a pair of real tweezers. So that kind of concludes my miscellaneous stuff there. Let's talk like occasional use things. So this is a Kevlar stuff sack called an sack, which you may or may not be familiar with. It's basically approved for even grizzly bears to not be able to get into this. So places that require bear resistant containers that don't force you to have the hard-sided containers, this is a great option. I did use a Bear Vault BV500, which is the bear can that I used for the Sierra, and I ended up picking that up in Kennedy Meadows South. I bought one right there at the general store because I didn't want to have it shipped to me. So I purchased one there and I used that, and then I left it at my cousin's house in Reno, Nevada. So basically like right after the end of the Sierras, and I went without it for the rest of the time. There's two more sections that you are required to have some kind of bear protection on the trail. The first one is Lassen Park in Northern California. However, it's a very small section that you're required, and it's only for overnight sleeping. So it's like a 24 or 26 mile stretch that by that point you're in good enough shape that you can easily do that all in a day, which is what I did. I started at one end and went past it. So I didn't need anything there. And then most of Washington actually is, as of 2022, I think they implemented, or maybe 2023. There's about 300 miles of Washington that require something now too, that I think is the Snoqualmie National Forest, which is actually like half of Washington, requires something. And so I ended up mailing myself this to White Pass in southern Washington. So that way I carried this for the whole rest of the time just to meet those requirements. Okay, last let's talk snow safety. So I started on the later side and it wasn't a particularly crazy year for snow. That being said, I'll show you what I brought. So for winter traction, I'm a big fan of the Black Diamond Distance Spike, which are these. So these are actually designed to be used with trail runners, as opposed to a lot of the micro spikes are designed to be used with like winter hiking boots. So again, I've got this for a demo. There's a nice big pull handle on the back here. So they're really aggressive. The chain gives you good traction. The spike really helps on the ice. And then the big thing that I really like about these is that it uses a soft shell over your foot, over your toes, as opposed to most things like, again, the micro spikes by Cartula use this stretchy rubber silicone stuff that goes over your foot. And trail runners are so thin that those actually can kind of squeeze your toes and be uncomfortable. But these work really, really well. So highly recommend those. I sent myself those to Kennedy Meadows South. The San Jacinto mountain range in Southern California, which is like 270 miles in. Depending where you start in the snow year, you might need that kind of stuff at that point, but I started late enough on an average to low snow year, so I didn't need any of this stuff until the Sierras. So I used this and I carried this until, I think I mailed this home at Kennedy Meadow North, which is again at the north end of the Sierras, sort of near Sierra City. So here's a kind of a controversial one for you. Most people will carry an ice axe. It's not a bad decision at all. It's the best tool for the job. That being said, I'm very comfortable in snow. I ice climb. I'm an instructor with the American Mountain Guide Association. So I am very comfortable self-arresting and I've had a lot of practice and training. So with all that being said, this is a device which you may or may not have heard of called a Whippet. It's made by Black Diamond, which is a company that makes ice axes. This was made for self-arresting in steep snow, not climbing. So essentially this works great for backcountry skiers, or in my opinion, if somebody's comfortable with it and trained and the snow conditions are okay, it's a great option for backpacking. You need a special trekking pole. This is the trekking pole of choice that I use, the same exact pair for both the CDT and the PCT, no damage. You have to replace the tips, that's normal. So I had to replace the tips once per trail, which is pretty good. Anyway, the way that it works is there's this steel threaded screw, tightens down, and once it's in, it's really secure. There's a stainless steel fitting that's attached into the grip here. And so this is basically used as a self-arresting device. So no matter what you choose, make sure you're practiced and trained with it, because just carrying it with you is not going to make it so you're safe. You have to know how to use it in case you do have to use it. And that being said, one of my favorite things about this is I would keep both this and this little stuff sack with the winter traction in this water bottle pocket. And so whenever I got to a spot that was a little bit steep or dangerous, I had no excuse on why I couldn't take 2 seconds just to reach into a pocket, not even take my pack off, throw these things on my feet, screw this onto one of my poles, and that way it was always in my hand and these things were always on my feet. Because the number of times that I saw people going down semi-sketchy or very sketchy things with their ice axe still strapped to their back of their pack, or their micro spikes in their mesh pocket in the back because they didn't want to take the time to take the pack off, was crazy. It happened way more than you'd think that it would. And so this just meant that it was always within reach. So kind of enough about that. One thing that I would recommend, a little pro tip for you, is that most trekking poles that you buy are, the poles exactly the same, but a lot of times they come with these fitted wrist straps that do have a specific left and a right. This is R for right. I think it's worth marking one of your poles, so that way you always know which one to grab first for that hand. It sounds silly, but it's one of those things that when you're doing it multiple times a day, it's just really kind of nice. This is a bunch of tape here. It's not duct tape. There's a tape that I like better that's made by 3M, which is really, really good quality stuff. And that's my tape of choice, so I put a few feet of that on there. I almost forgot. So I do have 2 small pill containers here. So the way they work is you just pinch it and it pops open. I like these just because it keeps the pills from getting all over the place, and they are watertight as long as you don't submerge them. So I typically would have one of these would have like an Advil PM or an Aleve PM, and just something to help with the muscle recovery and help kind of zonk me out if I was at someplace kind of noisy, or if I had to try to fall asleep before it got dark. And then the other one I'd always keep full with just with a regular old over-the-counter painkiller like Aleve. I didn't use it often, but there are some times that you're going to have overuse injuries, and taking some of the pain out of it is silly not to do. So as long as you use this stuff responsibly, that works for me. Also, in my first aid kit, I usually carry a little bit of Benadryl in case I have some kind of allergic reaction to something I don't know of. I don't know of any reactions that I need it for, but it's one of those things that you sure will be happy if you have it. Or maybe somebody else gets stung by a bee and they need it, and you might be able to save them or something. So that's good stuff to carry. Consider, if you don't know, another generic style drug called like Imodium. It's like an anti-diarrheal. It basically helps you not lose all of your water if you get sick in the desert. So that way you can hopefully get yourself out of the desert without getting too dehydrated. So I will sometimes carry that in desert sections. Whew, so that's a lot of stuff. So hopefully that was interesting and helpful. Please leave a comment below if you've got any questions on anything, or if you have any recommendations on equipment that I might not have heard of yet, because I'm always looking to find new stuff to try out. I really appreciate you taking the time to watch this, and my PCT experience video series is coming out. I'm trying to get a new one out every week or so. So the first one just launched, my episode 1, so check that out if you're interested. I'll leave a link in the description below. And one other thing that I'd like it if you'd consider checking out is if you'd like to support the channel, the best way that you can do it is actually by going to my woodworking website, which is linkswoodworking.com. I'll put a link in the description of that as well. So I'm a woodworker for my income. That's basically how I try to pay for these trips. So a few things that I have, I'll just show you really fast and I'll let you get going again. I make epoxy river boards, or I like to do personalized cutting boards, thing of that nature. So I can do custom work. Check out linkswoodworking.com. Thanks so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and stay tuned for more.